Did you see it? Do you realize what I have just done? I have now disproved that motion exists. Like there isn't something as motion. But you might ask, Regis, my good man, I just saw you. I just saw the rubber band flying at me. Okay, but let me explain. Imagine an archer pulling back an arrow. He lets the arrow fly. Imagine it, flying through the air. Now pause.
Ready, aim, and... there it goes!
We have just now suspended the arrow in time. Now imagine time as a film strip. Each moment in time is made up of these instances, like a frame in a movie. Each one a still image on its own. At that one instant, the arrow occupies exactly one spot in space. It is just sitting there. Motion means changing positions over time, but a single instant has zero duration. There's no overtime happening inside of it. Now this is true for every single instant of the arrow's flight, not just one, all of them. If the arrow is motionless at every instant and time is just a long chain of instances, then how does the arrow actually move? If you're still struggling to imagine this, think of it like this. The frame of an arrow occupies 1 millisecond, and the arrow is going to move to the next frame at 2 milliseconds. But what happens in between those two frames? We can capture a frame at 1.5 milliseconds, but for the arrow to move to 1.5 milliseconds, it needs to first pass through the frame of 1.25 milliseconds, and then 0.65, and so on, infinitely. Now this is an infinite regression of motionless frames. So logically, we have just proven that motion does not exist, but we all saw the rubber band flying at the screen, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the paradox. We can see this in a bunch of different examples too. For example, for my hands to clap, it needs to halve the distance, till it comes to my other hand, from let's say 30 centimeters to then 15 centimeters and then 7.5 and so on. But we still hear my hands clap. When I was in high school, I was waiting to write an exam, and while I was waiting, I turned around and talked to one of my fellow students. I asked him, if you were to walk to the grocery store, but you were only allowed to walk half the distance remaining each time, would you then ever reach the grocery store? So if the grocery store is 100 meters away, you can only walk 50 meters, then 25, then 12.5, and so on.
To reach your destination, you must first get halfway there. And then you must cover half of that remaining distance. And then half of that. Welcome to the paradox that never ends.
Would you ever actually reach the grocery store? And he said, without thinking for 2 seconds, of course you would. I was flabbergasted. I thought, you idiot, you absolute imbecile. You don't see the beauty of my perfect regression chain I have so masterfully presented to you. And after writing the test, I went home and then I walked to the grocery store to get my lunch. You see, something similar happened not too long ago. And by not too long ago, I mean 2,500 years ago. Zeno and Diogenes were discussing this exact issue. I don't really know, but that's the myth. And Diogenes' response wasn't to argue back with logic at all. He simply stood up and walked away, saying nothing. Or according to some versions, he muttered something like solvitur ambundolo, some Latin phrase. It means it is solved by walking.
Therefore, the idea is absolute. It cannot be questioned.
So the theme of today's paradox is all to do with logic. We think that it governs the world, and to some extent we think that it governs the most important decisions in life. But as we will find out, it isn't universal, and it breaks down just like physics when it comes to the event horizon of a black hole. Okay, so the next logical paradox that we are going to look at is Buridan's arse. He was a Latino. No, I'm joking. Okay, so imagine a donkey on a flat plain in a completely neutral setting. He is standing exactly halfway between two identical piles of hay. Same size, same smell, same distance. They are identical, atom for atom. No reason at all to prefer one over the other. Since the donkey has no rational basis for choosing one pile over the other, it can never decide and then starves to death, frozen between two perfectly good pieces of hay or piles of hay. It's a thought experiment about what happens when reason alone has nothing to break a tie. Does the donkey need a reason to choose, or can it just act arbitrarily and survive? The paradox is named after the 14th century philosopher Zeno Buridan. Though he never actually wrote the donkey version himself, it is a simplified illusion of a deeper question that he raised about free will and moral choice. Now, you know I've spoken about free will before and how I think that it doesn't exist. In real life, the donkey will probably turn right or left depending on his preferences. But that's only because he has no free will, and his choices are to a certain extent predetermined. But that isn't the point here. The paradox is about logic itself and how it breaks down. Pure logic needs a preference to make a decision. Outside factors like determinism, randomness are just side factors. But when we isolate logic on its own, we fall straight into this paradox because logically the donkey should just eat the hay. Instead, it starves to death because pure logic can't function when it has nothing to break the tie. So following our logical paradox, we have now gotten to one of the most famous paradoxes, the liar paradox. Okay, so here's the statement. This statement is false. If it is true, then it's false. If it's false, it's true. Now I'm going to do something a bit different here, and it'll help explain all of the previous logical paradoxes I've mentioned so far. There's a philosopher I'm quite fond of. He was an alright bloke. His name was Ludwig Wittgenstein. This man was obsessed with language. So here's basically what he'd say about our paradoxes. The liar paradox isn't a real crisis at all. It's what he would call language on holiday. A sentence pulled out of ordinary use and examined in a vacuum. This sentence is false doesn't actually do anything the way that the cat is on the mat does. It just looks meaningful because it's grammatically well formed. For Wittgenstein, meaning comes from how a sentence is used within a shared context or a language game. And the liar paradox sentence isn't embedded in any real one. The paradox may simply expose what happens when a rule gets stretched into territory or language that it was never designed for. So a sentence can sound grammatically correct, but still be meaningless. For example, what is the primary color of the number 7? This line of thinking can be used to explore other kinds of paradoxes too. Like, can an almighty being create a rock so heavy that even he himself can't lift it? So think of it like this. If I ask you to build a bridge using engineering math, you'd say, that's possible. Or, that's quite straightforward because engineering math or math as a language is in the same realm as constructing a bridge. But if I asked you to build a bridge using music theory, it would be impossible because it's simply not in the same realm. And that might be exactly what's happening when we run into these logical paradoxes. Our language wasn't built for it. And that's why we run into, paradoxes in the first place. That's why our disproving of momentum with an arrow doesn't actually make sense, even though we can logically prove it. That's also why our donkey dies of hunger, because we lack the proper tools to, quote unquote, build our bridge. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please comment some paradoxes that you find interesting. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And have a good one.